just you get to choose. Right? Like here's the scenario. The environment gives us something which can be perceived as negative, can be perceived as not working, can be perceived as problematic. The world's ending. But we get to choose to see it like that, or we get to choose to see it as an opportunity.
So clearly that it's my responsibility now to do that for other people. If I have information and, other people's success is my success and vice versa.
Because you know what? Like, the challenges or the roadblocks are the journey themselves.
There's no big things. It's all little things compounding on top of each other. Coach Nick and I are back with another episode of Truth Seekers. We have Tamar Nelson joining us shortly. One thing I'd like for the audience and the listeners to listen for is what Tamar says about disruptions and how that could actually be a benefit to us, something we've all experienced over these last couple of years, but how we could still maintain that principle moving forward into our future endeavors. How about for you, Coach?
And the importance of resilience when it comes to small and large organizations, and what is it that we need to remind ourselves of, like, to continue to get better, is the fact that we need to continue to get better. And so many principles that Tamar shares that are tight all together and important for organizational success, regardless of the size of that company.
Love it. Please enjoy this episode of Truth Seekers with guest Tamar Nelson. Hello and welcome to another episode of Truth Seekers along with Coach Nick Davies. I am Coach Josh Greco. We have Tamar Nelson joining us today. What's up, Tamar?
Hi, how are you guys doing?
So great. I'm excited to dive deep into our conversation today. We've had a couple conversations leading up to this one, but I love your energy. I love your background. I love so much about your mission and what you're working on. But I don't want to steal all the spotlight here. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and give us whatever necessary background you feel we need to know.
Good day to everyone, to all your wonderful listeners. My name is Tamar Nelson, and I am an operational resilience specialist. I've been working in this field for 20 plus years. My background is in industrial engineering, and continuous improvement is something that is, I would say, in my DNA. So I am very thrilled and honored to be here to share and to just learn as well from everyone here. So thank you for having me and all of this is coming from sunny Jamaica.
Coach Nick, when you hear the words continuous improvement, what do you think about?
Takes me right back to my corporate days. That's where it takes me back to. So is operational resilience, is that part of continuous improvement, or is it anything to do with like business continuity? Is it? Can you clarify that, Tamar?
Sure. So I would say that operational resilience has to do with building resiliency in operations, and I really see the need for this, especially now, particularly we are living in that era of great disruptions. So things are just happening more frequently at a greater scale, and it's taking a longer time to recover. So what we have to do in business is to build in our operations systems to ensure that when these disruptions happen, one, we can respond in a good time, but also the recovery period is also shortened so that we can not only thrive, but survive. So it incorporates a bit of business continuity, risk management, it has a communication strategy, it deals with your IT framework. There's a huge communications component and a measurement piece as well. So it does include all of what you just mentioned.
Cool. It really made me think of, thank you for sharing that. I got to share a story. It made me think about when I lived in Asia, there's the disaster recovery, business continuity is really important because of typhoons and stuff. So there's a guy, I remember this guy who was in charge of that. So he'd have to be on call all the time. So he'd take his laptop everywhere. And he'd go out to nightclubs and put his laptop behind the DJ booth. Like, hey man, can you look after this for me? And so like he'd be on call whenever he needed to be. but he wanted to live his life as well. Have some fun on a Friday night. But so that's what made me think about that for sure. But what can I ask, Tamar? Like, what juices you up? What gives you energy? You said continuous improvement is in your DNA, and I've got a different. Me and Coach, I think, have got a different spin on this now when it comes to coaching perspective. So, what is it that gives you the energy about this? Like, what makes you go, I need to do that, or like that was really, really fun, or like I got a lot of emotional upbeat from that. What is that for you?
Well, that for me is really seeing things improve, things
Okay.
get better. So both the people and the systems. When you see that result, that I would consider myself very results oriented. When I see that improvement in individuals, in business, in what they do, and what is put in place is realized, that gives me great satisfaction, to see all of those changes happen for good, for better.
I'm wondering, Tamar, if you can share, because I know just from our conversations, you deal with a very wide cross section of companies and different people. Is there a common thread of the companies you've worked with that you've noticed, like everyone has in common, that needs to be fixed or addressed or is very risky the way that they're built? What would that thing be?
I would say that I consider there are much similarities between organizations and nature, right? So I consider organizations like an organism. So you have different parts that work together. And when you look at nature, you'll see also that everything is a system. Just like an organization, it's a system. And one of the things that you have to do when you have a system is to look at any stimuli, what the actions are, and the feedback, right? To ensure that we are continuously getting better, improving, agile with what's happening in the space. And so, I am seeing where there is a stimulus, there is a response, but a lot of times we fall down on that feedback side. And that feedback is so important, right? For very important information to move forward, to grow, and to continue to thrive, especially in times like these. And so my answer would be not only that feedback, but having a system in place that captures that information and continuously uses it to help organizations to be better. I would say that would be my general response to that question.
I love it. Feedback is such an interesting topic because you can choose to do something about it or not do something about it, right? There's always a choice.
Yes.
So I'm wondering, is there a difference in smaller companies versus larger companies? Like it might be just my belief system that it's harder to implement change or to respond to feedback if a company is larger. What would you say to that?
Well, if you go back to the scenario of a system, the more moving parts you have, the more complex it gets. And one of the things that, we learn as engineers is that, we try to make the complex simple. So it's breaking down that complexity and get it to a point where it's easy to do and persons understand why they are doing it. So, if we look at it from that perspective, I would say it's the same approach. The same approach, but however, in a large organization, it's a bigger organism, which means it has more parts to maintain, more connections to ensure that things are flowing and firing through those those spaces. And so, but it's the same approach we would have, really.
What type of resistance do you see? Because I love your passion for this, Tamar. And I also, in my experience, and like Josh said, perhaps that's just my experience, but oftentimes in that big organization or that big organism, there are people there that perhaps go, we've always done it like this. What do you mean? I don't want to change. Like, just let me get on with my job. You've never heard that before, right?
Oh, we all have heard it, Nick. We have, and you'll be familiar with terms like the silo mentality, and right. The organization.
Yes.
communications goes through the door, but that interconnection is important, because it will be foolhardy for one department per se to say, sales to say it's better than operations, or operations more important than HR, because all have their strengths, just like how you would have the brain, the eye, the heart. So one of the things I like to say is that, for example, the operations is the heart of the organization, but the people are the core, right? So everything is connected, and they all have to work together, but specific attention has to be paid to the people to keep things going, to have things upright, right? To have that stability, that foundation that's necessary. So there's a huge component that has to be a huge amount of time that's spent on understanding the people, the dynamics of the people, what it is that is necessary to get everybody on board on the same page, so that everyone is moving in the same direction and working in unison toward the goals of the organization. And that is key for any improvement or change initiative that is considered. And I think, Nick, you mentioned Asia, and I did also spend some time in Asia. And one of the things that impressed me working as a consultant and really learning the Japanese way of doing improvement in business is that they harness the power of the people and utilize that on a daily basis, towards the goal of the company. So instead of having persons in silos and sticking to a job description, they really embodied what it is or what it meant to grow and to improve, and live that on a daily basis. So it wasn't a forced thing. They all bought into it. And what that did is that meant that innovations were happening all the time. The spin-offs are not just for the organization, but it's a win-win for everybody, because persons are now more engaged, they are happier, they are more collaborative, and the company benefits, they benefit because they are less stressed, there is more harmony. So this approach is definitely something that I've seen that works.
To that point, Tamar, how long does it take to implement that change? And then maybe part two to that question, is there any go-to exercise or principle or team building activity that you go to allow people to lean into that change?
Well, that's a two-part question. So the time, it does vary from company to company, right, in terms of the time period. But one of the things that, even when I was in Japan, like the senses or the masters that were, grooming us in this space would say, is that once you have identified an area for improvement, you need to act on it immediately. So it's not something that you would say, I need to fix that. That's a problem that I have. And you leave it there for years. And somebody say, do you know you have that problem? Yeah, I'm aware of it. What that becomes, it becomes a bigger problem as time goes on. So what we have to do is to, as soon as it's identified, we fix the issues. So if something can be fixed in a day, don't wait, don't give it a 3-month timeline to do, right? So what we'll do is to, form a cross-functional team, for example, and, not a huge team, not 20 persons. You're talking about, 3 to 6 persons, keeping it small, and you resource them. You go through and look at what are some of the pain points or the major bottlenecks that are happening right now. And then you can use a principle like Pareto's principle to select, what are the most critical things at this time, and focus on those things and give yourself a timeline, no greater than 3 months, right? To say, okay, this is what we are going to be working on. Give the team all the resources that they need to do so, and you'll see magic happen, right? I've tried this approach several times and the results are astounding. You know, you just infuse them with a kind of energy that goes beyond anything that a paycheck could do. And that's the kind of energy that you need. And that energy is contagious, and it just spreads like wildfire through the organization. And then you have, you know, in a time when everyone is going down, you will see a company going up in terms of their improvement and trends. So, yes.
Yeah, I'd love to get Coach Nick's thoughts on that too, because we're probably one of those examples. As a coaching firm, you know, business has picked up over the last couple of years, and we talk a lot about managing, you know, you mentioned energy, we might call it our state.
Yes.
We're in control of a lot of things that we maybe feel like we don't, especially during the times of COVID. It reminded us of what we don't have control over and what we do,
Right.
and what we can get back to. And I just think it's been, you know, we've talked about it frequently over the podcast because we've done this for a couple of years now, but it's all been during the pandemic. So it's kind of interesting to see it unfold over these last couple of years. So I might ask Coach Nick, you know, now that we're 2 years in and we've recorded all these episodes together, anything stick out to you that's been different from before as far as managing state or controlling what we can control and letting the rest go?
I think that the pandemic was a very interesting situation in many ways, but like in this context, it's like the collective comfort blanket was pulled away, so there's less places to hide. So I think that's been something that's been really helpful for people that decide that they're going to lean into that. I think, and I just think that's always true. The only difference is how stark is it in your particular environment, right? So that season, the thing that happened to everyone in the whole world, but usually it's just the season of where you particularly are, right? So whether it's your country or your organization, your business, or your life, like there's always the seasons of where that happens as well. So it all depends, right? Because you always get to choose. And so I'd rather be in a situation which gives you the push. Like I just got back from vacation, Coach Josh, you know that, and I spent two weeks back in England tomorrow. And so getting back yesterday, and I spent an extra week there because me, my wife, and my mother-in-law got tested positive for COVID. So that was unexpected. And I came back yesterday and I was even more fired up than I was before because I got some urgency back, right? Because my season had changed a little bit. So that was a push to go to that place, to what was most important. And like, as you're talking tomorrow, there's so many triggers going off my mind about my corporate experience. And so there were so many things for that weren't aligned with who I am, who I wanted to be, what I wanted to create for myself. But it's so many things that are similar. And it's just a reminder, like sometimes it's just like a lock, right? Like a safe. You just need a couple of extra numbers and it's clicking in. And like for me, the move, taking all those principles you talked about, because Coach, that's what we work with all the time. The semantics are a little bit different, but it's really the same stuff, right? And so it's basically saying, have you got the right people on the bus? Like because the first things first, if no one agrees that if like not everyone agrees they want to be there and they want to make things better, you could have the best ideas in the world for continuous improvement. If people aren't listening or not willing to listen, it doesn't matter because they won't change it and it won't be like that, the beautiful existence like you talked about, right? You've got to have the right people that are committed to the outcomes. It's the same thing that we do, right? But just in a slightly different way. And so it's so cool to see that. But like it's the same, nothing changes, right? It's that. I think that's why what we do collectively is always useful, always powerful. And in fact, I would say it should be mandatory in a certain way, because if we're not growing, we're not changing, not continuously moving forward, we die, right? And when I first got introduced to the continuous improvement concept, and we coaching probably call it constant never-ending improvement, but continuous improvement from a corporate perspective, you know what I first thought tomorrow? That's great. When does it finish?
It's a journey, Nick.
How do I know when we're done? Right?
We're never done. When we're done, right. And we're dead.
Yeah. So it's a great reminder. Like if you aren't willing to go on a continuous improvement journey where you are in your business or your job or a part of your life, that should be very telling, because it means you probably don't want to be there or you shouldn't be there.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I agree 100%, Nick. And, when you're speaking, one of the things that I saw happen during the pandemic was that a disruption always highlights your weakest area.
Yes.
Right?
Mm.
That's what comes to the fore. And it's important that when these disruptions happen, we don't ignore what it's showing us, because what it's giving us is an opportunity to grow and to improve on something. So it may be, I will use your scenario. You got tested positive, you could freak out and say, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Or you could say, okay, I will be in quarantine. Let me use this time to, read those 3 books that I wanted to read, or to bond more with my wife, or, or to, build that website, that page on the website that I always didn't have time to do. So it's it you can use the disruptions for opportunities, but especially in business, what I saw, for example, was that communications went through the door. They didn't know, it got worse. So it was a problem before, it got even worse when a disruption happened. Or there were some leadership issues. And of course, in a hybrid or so situation, it's a different kind of leadership that you're going to need in a situation. And instead of fixing it, some persons may just say, okay, there is no hybrid situation, everybody back to the office. So, you would have lost out on that opportunity to grow and to develop your leaders, for example, in that case. And I saw this struggle happening a lot. And so I decided to start a podcast, in operations, called the COO's Corner, just to be able to share success factors that persons can learn from, that they don't have to go through it themselves, and see what others are doing and how they can grow and improve as time goes by, even in a disruption. So I agree with you 100% on your thoughts on that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks for saying that. Something really, and this can be my takeaway, coach, right? It's in extreme situations, it creates extreme leverage. If you think about it as a continuum, one extreme, no side, the other extreme to the other side, like during the pandemic, the opportunity to leverage extremes was much higher both sides. So as your point, if something's bad, it's going to be really bad, but the opportunity is so great because the upside is just that people aren't leaning into it. So if you can win when it's like that, when things come back to more of the middle ground, like there's less differences in the middle, right? Things are more of the same in the middle. It's the extremes that make the difference. So extremes create extreme leverage. If you can leverage and take advantage of those things when things are bad or unexpected, then when it comes back to medium, then you're going to do much better than everyone. And if it goes the other side, you're going to be absolutely taking over in your particular field.
I'm sure you both coaches have been seeing that and experiencing that. As things come back to normal, you are way ahead of the game because you had put in the work during that time period. So, based on what you have said here, you know what you're talking about, and you really live in that.
You live it, absolutely.
Well, and I fully embrace and embody a disruption always highlights your weakest area. I wrote that down because that was so true. That was true for myself, and it couples with my takeaway today is act immediately. I think that's a lot of what you do, Tamar, right? Is you work with companies so that they're able to act immediately. So if they don't have that resilience, they're not able to act immediately, or maybe that's the belief system that they have. But just build the system, build the organism so that it's built in so that you can adjust to those things that are highlighted when they're highlighted. And I've talked before on the show about Mel Robbins has a 5-second rule, and it's not about food falling on the ground. It's about when you have an idea in your mind, you have 5 seconds before your mind talks you out of it. So if you want to change something, do something, act on something, do it right away. As soon as you have that thought, and then, like you say, a thing that takes maybe a day to address, don't wait to address it for 3 months. I love that.
Yeah.
So Tamar, bring us home some sort of takeaway, something you're something of value from our conversation today? And of course, we want you to highlight your podcast again. If you could just mention that, please. Yeah.
Sure. I would say to everyone listening in to really challenge the status quo. We are used to things being, at, normal, but in the space that we are living in, disruptions are happening all the time, and you don't have to live in a particular part of the world for that to happen anymore. And so if we can find even one thing within our space to improve daily, I think it would bring immense value to organizations today. There are lots of golden opportunities sitting there just waiting to be unearthed. And if you engage your teams, they know where they are and they can help you to find them. And, not just look at problems when they arise and put a band-aid over it, but to really dig deep and get to the root cause of why these things are happening. And you will see some great changes happening within your organizations. And when the entire team is working together on looking for these golden nuggets, focusing on continuously adding value and serving their customers, you'll see that the team really comes together, and you'll have less of that resistance to change that will happen when that happens. So I would really encourage persons to take that people-centric approach and find ways that they can improve. And if you want to hear more about how to build success in the operations today at an individual or a process or organizational level, you can listen into the COO's Corner podcast on any of the major podcast platforms, or you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you can also find me on LinkedIn at Tamar Nelson, and my website is tamarnelson.com. So I'd love to hear from you and hear all the successes that you are having and the improvements that are occurring in your organizations.
I love it. The COO's Corner. That's great. Tamar Nelson, thank you so much for joining Truth Seekers. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for watching another episode of Truth Seekers. We appreciate your interaction, so please comment, like, subscribe to YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want more, check out some of our links to our masterclass, The Achiever's Mindset, and come join our LinkedIn group. And what do you want to see more of? Remember, we're here to share the simple secrets of successful. So help us do that. What do you want to see? What do you want to see more of? Thanks, and see you again next time.